Hey, Mark Rodriguez here. You're watching America's #2 best cure for insomnia, the fighting podcast. And with me are
William White, aka Ninja Panda 1980.
Wendy McBride or Jupi Chan, also known as Ninja Jupi.
I guess that leaves me coming back after a absence of far too long. Bit of a hiatus, but I'm proud to be back. Rikki Roxx, God of Thunder, Lord of Rock and Roll. Happy to be back on the Diving Cutter Fighting Podcast. And that only leaves one man, the one and only Mr. Electricity himself. Take it away, Mr. Johnny Rodriguez.
Johnny Rodriguez.
There he is.
so
Hey, he's got a hat.
since Street Fighter 6 recently came out a couple of weeks ago, this will be more about Street Fighter, kind of like all about Street Fighter. We'll go into 6 and, kind of go back to the days of the World Warrior. We already talked about Street Fighter 1 in detail, and Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, and, whatever else comes to mind. One thing I want to say, though, first, before we get too deep into
A Street Fighter smorgasbord. What a thing to jump into.
Yeah, basically. So, and everything, the game mechanics, the history, the characters, their histories, all the shit that's changed. Anyways, one thing I want to say, though, back when we were doing the LBRY podcast, sometime after they did the big reveal of Street Fighter 6 coming out, where we only saw Ryu and Luke at the beginning, showing off the realistic graphics and all that, Johnny and I made a little podcast, a short one, because no one else was available at the time, and we had our own little predictions of 5 characters each who we wanted to enter in the game. And just, I'm just doing a quick comparison because of course now we know who the roster is, So we already included Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, and Luke because obviously Ken's going to be in it. Obviously Chun-Li's going to be in it. And we already knew that Ryu and Luke are going to be in it. We set aside 4 just mysterious slots because obviously you got to have new characters. It's not going to be all returning. So the characters I chose Guy, Fei Long, Elena, Eagle, and Sagat, so none of mine made it. And Johnny chose Blanca, Yoon, Yang, Cody, and Julie. So he was the only one that got one. At least one. He got Blanca in there. But the curious thing, though, is that we were also talking about, what other characters can he add? Because what other fighting styles have they not yet added in Street Fighter after so many games? And the 2 styles I mentioned, because we were kind of drawing blanks, was, they haven't had a character with a drunken master kung fu style. That's the weird thing. And you know what? It doesn't necessarily have to be an old guy like the Chan movies. It could be a young guy or a young woman, And bam, we got Jamie. That was weird. And then I also said we don't have a judo fighter, and I mean we kind of have a judo fighter. We got Manon. Just that I could never predict a judo fighter. There's also a fashionista supermodel, and also it's a ballet. That was a weird combination, but she is a judo fighter. So that was kind of interesting, just that, the little preview. But I'm surprised that, the only one we guessed right was Blanca. We didn't, no one else made the cut,
So you've been playing a lot of Street Fighter 6, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So how have you been doing with that?
Oh, pretty good. I just have to get used to the crazier combos and stuff. Some of the crazier things they added this kind of, it's kind of like a focus attack thing. They got a thing called a drive gauge now, and you can do all these special things. And as you do them, the gauge goes down. So what happens is, as long as the gauge has stock in it, you could do this thing where you kind of I guess you can absorb a hit and then smack someone. It's kind of like a cool slow motion type thing, and you could use that cleverly timed. But then the other guy could do it too, so you could cleverly block one, and then the other one blocks and hits. So that's like a new game changer for Street Fighter. They added a thing where you have an auto block. You're kind of glowing with this blue energy, and you just automatically block the attacks. You can't spam it too much because you leave yourself wide open to throws. If you dash while doing that, your character does a more powerful dash that can also cancel through things and stuff like that for the super crazy combo nuts out there. And the last thing is that the X moves, when you do, we play Street Fighter 4 and 5, that if you do a fireball with the 2 buttons instead of 1 button, it's a slightly more, powerful version of the super moves. Now the EX stuff, you could do them, but it's also part of the drive gauge. I was so confused because I thought that was using the regular gauge that it did before, but, So once the drive gauge expires, your character's burned out. They can't do the stuff. and the character visually looks a bit more tired, like Ryu's more like that, but he's more like that, as you could tell. And you're more vulnerable to being knocked dizzy in that state. So you have to be careful with that shit. But other than that, it plays familiar enough and everything. You have to get used to the characters and stuff. I see this game's more technical. You have to get more with the basic attacks too, not so much the specials. You got to find out, because all characters got, specific, moves and stuff. Like Chun-Li's hard punch, she has a very far-reaching punch that if you're not prepared, you can catch someone off guard with that. If you duck with her, she does kind of like a kung fu thing that smacks twice and stuff like that. I think if she ducks, she also does kind of like a thing she kind of throws her hands down and kind of bops you too. So you gotta know everyone's different things.
So as I was doing my research, because again, as we've talked about, when it comes to fighting games, I like them, I play them, but I'm always kind of a neophyte. I'm not deep in it like some of y'all are. But in doing my research, I saw that it's a very common popular opinion that Street Fighter V had one of the worst launches of any fighting game in history.
Yes.
Opinion was very poor on the launch version of Street Fighter V. Later updates a little bit better received, but at launch it was considered to be a disaster. So how would you say Street Fighter 6 so far, just come out, how would you say it measures up compared to the launch version of Street Fighter 5? Better, worse, way better, way worse, about the same?
Way better. A lot more stuff. Because Street Fighter 5, upon release, it just had the basic roster. Their story mode for each character was a very short little thing, and you sometimes fight once or twice, even if, and the computer opponents are pretty much standing there and then you hit them, So, there wasn't much to do besides just fighting online. And later on, you added storylines and crap,
Like it got better with the updated releases, though.
Yeah, they had a big arcade mode and all that. So Street Fighter 6, as of right now, before, anything else gets added, just right now on release, on launch, they got what is it, 20 characters or so, 18 characters, I think, on base launch. They all got their arcade modes. They got this real big ass, almost like a separate game altogether, this world tour mode where you can create your own person. You can make your own Rikki Roxx avatar, and you get to train under Chun-Li and Ryu and all them. And as you play through the story, there's a little story there too, and you grind by beating up random people on the street. It's kind of funny because even the old lady can challenge you to a fight, you whoop her ass. But the cool thing is, as you level up,
that sounds great because I've always wanted to train under Chun-Li.
Yeah, but we're talking about fighting though, not the other kind. But anyway,
hey, you know what the man said: fucking and fighting, it's all the same.
Yep. They both need stamina and resistance. But anyway, the other thing
for the kids who don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how it goes. But anyways, the other thing is that the characters, the ones you make up, you have separate little, I think you have up to maybe either 5 or 6 moves. So as you train with other people, you can give yourself Ryu's fireball, but also Chun-Li's helicopter kick, but also Guile's sonic boot. You kind of mix and match, so that's cool. And there's an extra thing called Battle Hub where you also fight the other people, but it's kind of like a virtual arcade, I guess. And you can have your avatar fight the other avatars with your mix-up moves and shit. But the other thing is that the arcades got old games in them. So you can actually sit in the arcade and you can actually play the full-on Street Fighter 2, the Road Warrior. You can play Final Fight. You can play... There was some shooter game or something that Capcom made. You could play these old games too. And apparently they rotate. Stuff I guess Street Fighter and Final Fight will always be there. But if you check every, 2 weeks, they'll have a different game. From Capcom. Like Mega Man Powered Up Warriors and stuff like that. No, what was it called? Mega Man Mega Battle, some shit like that. And other games like that. So there's a lot to do. And this is all on release. And Street Fighter 5 didn't have none of that. It was mostly just fighting.
So they're off to a great start. That's good to hear. Now, we obviously have a lot to talk about today. So if I'm not mistaken, you guys already did one on the original Street Fighter, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can still go over that a little bit. I wasn't there for that. So, You know, that, I mean, that is where it all started. So what were some of the stuff you guys went over the first time around?
As I remember, we mostly went over like our own personal experiences, how we first encountered the game. It was more, I think, Wendy and William, because they actually played arcade. We've never seen it until like the
Yeah, the
actual
original
competitions.
the original cabinet was really rare. It wasn't that successful, the Street Fighter One cabinet, especially the one with the punch pads, because they broke a lot and people got hurt beating on them things after a while. So the 6-button one though, that was way more popular, but even still, really not that easy to find. They didn't do a whole lot of them. Trying to find. I had notes on how many cabinets the original one sold.
Hmm.
Okay, yeah. So the punch pad version of Street Fighter only sold about 1,000 cabinets.
Hmm.
So that's not good. That's why most people they hear about it like it's legendary. The first Street Fighter had those punch pad controls, but almost nobody's ever seen one. I've never seen one actually, just in pictures. But yeah, that would be why they only sold about 1,000 cabinets.
Yeah, I've actually played one, and like I'm pretty much having PTSD just thinking about it because my arm just hurts.
I can
Because
imagine.
yeah, you have to just beat the crap out of that thing to get it to go to its hardest punch or its hardest kick. And a lot of the times the padding would be like dented in to the point that you're actually hitting metal at that
Yeah,
point.
No.
that's what I heard.
Wow.
I mean, the idea was very interesting. You know, the harder you hit the pad, the harder your character would hit his opponent. On paper, it sounds absolutely amazing. In practice, I can immediately see how that would be a disaster. I mean, yeah, basically what you said was everything I've ever heard about that specific cabinet. So it's no wonder why they switched to the 6-button, which was much more successful. There's as many as 50,000 of those floating around in the wild. So that was obviously much more well received than the punch pad version. I'm amazed you found one because those things are rare. Oh yeah, like in the boardwalk or something?
Um, yeah, we used to have this arcade in the Oglethorpe Mall called the Gold Mine, and that's where we had it at. And it was usually every new game that they put up, they would put like right in front of the door. So as soon as you walked in, you saw it. So as soon as I walked in, I saw that, and that was pretty much all she wrote with me from there as far as Street Fighter lore went. Like, despite hurting my wrist, I was hooked.
Like, I know I've played games that had similar tactile feedback controls in the arcade. I mean, there's a small part of my brain that wants to say that I played it somewhere in like 87, 88. I know I played it at school on one of those crappy computer ports they made of it, but I never officially played it until it came out on the Anniversary Collection a couple of years ago. That's the first time I played the original one, and I did not care for it very much.
Yeah. Now they tried to do something on the sly like years back, and it kind of caught my attention. I remember there was a system known as TurboGrafx 16,
Yeah.
and they had an NEC version, but it wasn't called Street Fighter. It was called Fighting Street.
Fighting Street.
Exact same
There it
game, but it was reworded backwards. And oh yeah, Ricky, this was definitely for you as far as nostalgia goes. In Street Fighter 6, when you play the World Tour mode, which is the one where you build your avatar, it's actually set in Metro City from the actual Final Fight game. So you're getting 3D versions of the old areas from the actual Final Fight game, and you even run into characters from the classic Mad Year game.
That's really awesome. And I was going to mention at some point today that how cool I think it is that the universes of Street Fighter and Final Fight and now even rival schools and stuff like that, but they've all become sort of melded and intertwined because originally, as a lot of people know, and I'm sure you guys probably mentioned at one point or other, Final Fight began as a sequel to Street Fighter called Street Fighter 89. They're going to reimagine the series as a side-scrolling beat-em-up, but instead of having Ryu and Ken be the playable characters, they just switched it over to Guy, Cody, Hagar, and they decided to do its own thing. But between various fighting games as well as Saturday Night Slam Masters and everything, you know, we've seen how these franchises have become intertwined, and I really do think that's cool because I don't know, it's just something I like to see. Call me crazy.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a higher realm of just nostalgia in the game, even as far as the some of the characters that show up in the World Tour, like for instance, the old classic joke of the April Fool's gag for the character Shinlong, the mystery character, who later becomes Goken in the Street Fighter series. But Shinlong actually shows up in the World Tour mode. Like the actual Shinlong actually shows up after all these years of, being an April Fool's prank, being an old EGM joke. They actually put him in the game, which I thought was just hilarious. Like, it's definitely one that, even if you're an old school player, if you pick this one up, it might take a little bit of getting used to, but it's definitely worth it. And it's a lot of fun. The whole world tour thing is like a big trip down memory lane.
I don't know if you guys have seen this before going any deeper, because I always try to have a random drink in each episode. I've seen this Ultimate Coke. Have you guys seen that?
Oh yeah, the League of Legends Coke.
Oh really? Or that's just like joke?
No, if you look on the left-hand side of the bottle, it's got the League of Legends logo.
Oh, so that's what the fuck this is all about. I was like, Ultimate Coke. Okay, what's so ultimate about it? But, Oh, jeez.
Will mentioned, he used the term takes a little getting used to. And still on the subject of the original Street Fighter, since so many people never played it until years later, I know that game definitely took some getting used to for me, and I'm sure a lot of you guys as well. I know it's gotten a pretty poor reception nowadays, but, when it came out, it was actually pretty well regarded by a lot of people. They thought it was very innovative, primarily the graphics. But, I mean, let's be honest, it was the first one-on-one fighting game. A lot of things that we take for granted now started with that game, like the special moves, which were not even listed on the controls, on the cabinet. You had to just kind of discover them on your own, which was something years later you were still having to do. But it was new in 87, And one thing I always talk about is putting things in their perspective when they were fresh. And, even though we look at it now as a pretty poor game, especially compared to everything that's come since in the series, I do think that when you really look at it in the context of its time, it's easy to see why it was much more well-received on its initial release, because it basically invented a whole genre. The second game perfected that genre, but you still have to look at the first one and say, well, that is where it all began,
Yeah, that is very true. And like you said, it was pretty much the kickoff for the entire fighting game genre as a whole.
Yeah.
As a whole. And special moves being hidden, that was the whole schoolyard back in the day. Hey, I did this, and this, and the guy just jumped up in the air and he spun around like a tornado, and everybody's like, oh, bullshit, prove it,
Imagine being the first kid or dude at the arcade, what have you. Imagine being the first person ever to pull off a Hadouken and have people see that shit. Like, that person must have been king for a day. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh, yeah.
You never,
he was the legend of that
never
arcade.
saw it before. You never saw it before.
Yeah.
And then the Shoryuken will take like crazy damage if you hit it just right,
That's the if, though. That's the thing. When I went back and played it on the Anniversary Collection, I couldn't do shit for shit. Now, I'm not great at fighting games anyway, but I played every game on the collection all the way through, and I was able to beat all of them except for maybe one, but, I couldn't do shit for shit with the original Street Fighter. I played it for 10 minutes. I'm like, I can't do it. And I always push through on most things, even if I'm frustrated or not doing well. I say I'm going to stop, but I don't. I just dig in and push through. I couldn't take more than 10 minutes of that game. I respect it for what it was, definitely. And whenever people shit on it, just because I'm devil's advocate, I'll be like, well, people did love it when it was new. Just saying. But for all of that, yeah, I can't fucking play that game.
I just find it weird that they showed it in both It movies, like the It remake. I'm surprised they showed Street Fighter 1 instead of maybe Double Dragon or some other game for him to play or something. I guess maybe because It's like let's show Street Fighter 2. Oh wait, no, the movie takes place before it comes out. Put Street Fighter 1. It's just I can't imagine kids playing Street Fighter 1 the way they would play Street Fighter 2. And I can't even imagine the child actors that are of course modern day kids like man, this is a janky shit you boomers used to play. Like damn, you know what I mean? Like okay, now play this game and pretend it's the most awesome thing ever and action. You know what I mean? Like
I'm trying to think right now of a bigger jump in quality of any kind of game and its sequel. I mean, Street Fighter to Street Fighter 2 might just be the king of that. I mean, there's been plenty of sequels that outdid the first game by 100 miles. But, I mean, if you play Street Fighter 1 in a vacuum, you don't necessarily think it's going to launch a franchise that's earned billions of dollars. You just think, okay, well, that's a neat game that's of its time. You know, you don't necessarily think that it's going to lead to all the stuff that it did. I mean, Street Fighter 2 is where it really started. I mean, let's be honest, that's the real beginning of the franchise. That's where I know I really found out about it. I'm pretty sure that's where most of us found out about it and became fans or followers. So I know we're going to go probably of everything, probably the deepest into Street Fighter 2. So why don't we just go ahead and do that?
I was going to say that somewhere, some alternate universe, you know that old karate game where it's like the two guys and the sensei is like, stop, begin, that kind of thing? Some other alternate universe, there's like the karate game cinematic universe, you know what I mean? Like that game took off instead of Street Fighter, you know?
Oh, the old Karate Master game? I do remember that.
All right, guys, so now we're back. We're going to go into Street Fighter 2, The Road Warrior, which is the first one.
Real quick, I just want to say one thing I forgot to mention that I thought was really cool, and I'm not sure if you guys mentioned it when you talked about the first Street Fighter, but the original director later went on to SNK. He left Capcom, and he ended up doing series like Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting, and I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, William brought that one up, and we will be doing later on the Art of Fighting episode and everything too, so stay tuned for that one, guys. So yeah, we're gonna go Street Fighter 2, The Road Warrior, the original game, the one that really did like really kick off the whole franchise. And I forgot if I said this before in another podcast or not. I'll just go over real quick what Johnny and I thought. First time we saw it was at the arcade, but we didn't have money to actually play it. We just saw it. But we were kind of blown away because it had like 6 buttons and the joystick had the thing where it's like, you know, obviously nowadays we're used to that, but back then, you know, like the joystick says forward flip, back flip, crouch, block. We're like, the fuck, what? And it's like, you know, short. Well, it was jab, strong, fierce, short, forward, roundhouse. And like, the fuck is this? Is it like a game or a calculator? You know what I mean? Like we didn't like all these buttons. And we played the game a little bit, but we weren't that good at it. It wasn't until we had the Super Nintendo version at home, then we got to play, we got to practice all the moves and stuff. Then we go back to the arcades, and we started kick ass in the arcades because everyone else was still kind of figuring out the shit. We know how to do the Hadoukens and the uppercuts and the infamous, you know, high kick, low kick combo, or the kick, they block, grab, and throw combo that a lot of people do because we were doing that shit to each other, you know? But yeah, that was mostly our experience in a nutshell. Unless you want to add anything else real quick, Johnny?
Yeah, pretty much like what you said. I mean, the concept of getting used to the 6 buttons and the joystick, that was pretty cool. But once you get used to it, you can see how this eventually became like a commercial success to the point where other you know, the competition started making their version of, you know, Street Fighter 2.
Fighting history.
Oh, that's the most ripped off game in history, the Street Fighter 2. Everybody ripped Street Fighter 2 off. I mean, even you had Justice League Task Force, which was one of the worst, and you had Tournament Fighters, which was one of the best, but everybody ripped off Street Fighter 2.
Remember the awesome Clay Fighters.
Oh god.
But yeah, no.
So next time you all come to visit, we are going to make some time and watch this. It's been years for both of you, I'm sure. You'll get the memory berries with this one. And you can hold up your copy, Roxx. So you got like a different cover for it. I used to have that one too, but the DVD got warped over time.
Yeah, I
It's
picked this
literally
one up when it came out. This was a big deal because this was the uncensored, unrated, original American version with all the boobs and the cursing and the blood and all that good stuff that you love. I mean, if you weren't a fan of Chun-Li before, let me tell you about this movie.
Yeah, we'll go into Chun-Li in full detail. But that's like, this is the third time I bought this shit. The first time I found it in Toys R Us in the VHS, you know. There was a Mexican show that reviewed video games, mostly Nintendo games. It was called Club Nintendo, right, Johnny? Or was it called something else, Nintendo?
Yeah, I think it was called Good Nintendo.
Yeah, but sometimes for the outro, they would show scenes of like when Ryu and Ken are fighting Bison, but without us having seen the anime, we're like, yo, where's this animation from? It's fucking sweet, you know? So I found the VHS version in Toys R Us. Then eventually, well, you know what, VHS tapes, what happens to them? So then I found the one that you got, that one, but over time, you know, it just got warped. And then now this is my third time buying it. Still in this package, by the way. Like I said, I had plans that you were going to watch it with me, both of y'all's, but, you know, we were busy. We were watching Megan. We were watching the Super Mario Brothers movie. We were watching Commando. And we were watching White Chicks. And
Why?
we were watching Suzume.
I had never seen that really stupid movie. And I said, no, you were watching this movie. It's so stupid. Please watch it. Make jokes. It deserves them, you know?
Now, here's where it gets funny. We're talking about the Street Fighter 2 anime movie in VHS. Now, there were two different versions of the VHS, and I actually have both of them. One of them had the standard red cover, which was Ryu doing a jump kick, and it was like red, and it had the original Street Fighter logo. And then there was an uncensored version, which looked like the championship edition cover, where it was blue and it had a different color font on the text. But that was the one where it had all the blood, there was cursing, there was the whole unedited Chun-Li shower scene just before the Vega fight, which that officially turned it.
That made so many boys into men.
And but yeah, there were two versions of that anime, and I actually got lucky and managed to nab them both because we used to have a place called Babbage's back in the day, and that was before they became like Electronic Boutique, which then progressed to GameStop. And yeah, there were two different versions of that, and that by far was, to me personally, one of the best renditions of Street Fighter as far as an anime goes. There's a live action one that was actually really good, but we'll talk about that one a little bit.
We'll get that in a bit. For now, why don't you all get
we almost completely jumped over the game to get to the movie.
That's what I'm saying. Let's get into each person's account of the first time you encountered the World Warrior in the wild.
So, believe it or not, I'm pretty sure the first time I ever played Street Fighter 2, which came out in 1991 after being developed by Akira Nishitani and Akira Yasuda, who were the guys responsible for Final Fight, which was awesome. I love Final Fight. But yeah, so they got to work on Street Fighter 2, and that came out in 1991. That was the first ever fighting game where players had the opportunity to choose a variety of different characters. First game you could only play as Ryu or Ken if you were the second player. But yeah, that was a huge deal. And I think the first time I ever saw Street Fighter 2 was at a Burger King around Christmas time. Back then, sometimes various places would just invest in an arcade cabinet to try to get some extra money and keep the kids busy while they're waiting in line for food. I mean, you know, nowadays kids would say, what's an arcade? Or what's an arcade game? But back in my day, just as often as I'd see games at the arcade, I'd see games at the laundromat, the pizza place, the bar, all over the place. You know, you couldn't turn around without seeing an arcade cabinet. You'd find
Also, it was like a little grocery store. At the arcade.
Yeah, the bodegas and whatnot. They were everywhere. So you'd see it even at a McDonald's or a Burger King. So I remember one time it was winter, and it was probably winter of 91. And I was at Burger King with my dad, and I remember seeing this arcade cabinet and these two guys just huddling up, and then one guy fucking punches the other guy in the fucking face. I'm like, holy shit, let me see if I got a quarter. So I knew nothing about the game, but I just wanted to try it out. I think I might have played it for 3 minutes and 2 quarters before, the food was done and I was done too, because I was never any good at those fucking games. But I liked that. I was like, hey, this is cool. If I see it again, I'll play it again. And then my dad's cousin, actually, he mostly did and does construction and home repair, but for a while, he opened up a diner in South River, New Jersey as a side business, and he was doing pretty good with it for a while. And he put an arcade cabinet or two in the vestibule, so when people would walk in, they could occupy themselves before they come in and get their food or whatever. So he got a Street Fighter 2 cabinet. And a lot of times I'd go there after school with my mom and dad. My mom worked there for a while, so we'd just hang out there for a few hours before going home. And to keep busy, I would play Street Fighter 2, even though I was horrible at it. But I'd usually play it for a little while, at least, every time I was there. Never got any good at it back then, but that's how I would play it the most until it came home. And we'll talk about the home versions and our experience with those. But yeah, that was how throughout 1991, 92 into 93, that would be my experience. Not really the arcades so much, even though obviously I saw them at the arcades, but there would usually be a line to play them at the arcades. But at the diner or the corner store, usually you could just walk right up and play it. So it was a much easier experience, more fun for me rather than standing around waiting in line. So yeah, that was where I jumped in on it. Pretty much right at the beginning, but not too deep.
Mm. Now, one thing I do want to say is that for us, there was a store called Woolworth. I don't know if that's
You said Woolworth.
Okay.
You said Woolworth.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they always had like just two arcades near the entrance, and the rest was whatever. It's been so long, I forgot what they actually sell in there, but it was always like, you know how sometimes the wall is like a big like glass, you can see through it. So there's an arcade there. That's when we first saw the word Warrior. It wasn't until Champion Edition appeared and it showed up in our grocery store nearby that was called La Escondida, which means, I guess, the hidden place or the hideout, whatever. Then we had constant access to it. That's the one we would remember the most, as opposed to Word Warrior. I think we played it maybe once or twice at a spare quarter on us when we were near the Woodworth area. But that store, though, that's what we played the most between that and the SNES version. And when did you first encounter this legendary game?
That is a good question. I want to say probably the arcade in the mall that they're tearing down now. They're redoing now. Yeah, because my dad's friend used to work there, and he used to let me get like free tickets and tokens and things. So
They do like what they do like in Saved by the Bell and in other shows. You know how they always want to like tear down the place, but then like in the last minute they're like, no, you can't tear it down. It's actually a historic landmark according to this and this. So you can tell them this mall has Street Fighter 2 the World Warrior. It's a historic landmark. You can't tear this mall down.
Yeah, I mean, most of the stores there are closed. It's just so dead. So I heard that they're going to get rid of most of the stuff over there. But anyway, there was an arcade in there, and I used to go there almost every weekend, and I used to play the games there, and I'm pretty sure that's where I saw Street Fighter 2, or where I would have played it anyway, because I didn't have a Super Nintendo or a home console at that time anyway. So one of the things that drew me to it was Chun-Li, because I'd never seen a female character fighting or in much of a game before. And
well, I mean, again, that was the first fighting game that gave you that kind of gameplay variety. So she was, in fact, the groundbreaker. I mean, she was the first playable female fighting game character, not just the first renowned one. I mean, she broke the door down. With those
with her kicks.
Fucking dives.
Now, there are two small facts. I'm going to beat William to them because he probably already knows them. But there's two small facts about Chun-Li back when the Street Fighter game was in development, you know? The first fact is when the first making the game and everything, originally they wanted to give Chun-Li this kind of a sexist thing, but they wanted to give Chun-Li a smaller life bar because, you know, she's a woman, she's not as strong as the men, you know, that kind of crap. But then, like, I guess whoever's in charge said, nah, fuck that shit, give her like a regular health bar like everybody else. And then the second fact is they interviewed whoever the hell you guys know the name of, whoever actually designed Chun-Li, why you gave her like such thick thighs, and instead of like, you know, some some lengthy reason or whatever. No, it's just like, hey, I like women with thick thighs. See? I like how they have those little articles on Facebook you click on. It's like a super drawn out shit, and when you finally get to the bottom, it's like it's just that because I like women with thick thighs. And
I like thick thighs, and I cannot lie. So I guess that's pretty much what he was saying, right?
Yeah, Shoney's hips don't lie, yo.
That brings me to a story. This is probably the best time to work it in. You were talking about how originally they assumed she should be weaker than the other characters because she's a female and all this and that. Well, when the home version came out for Super Nintendo, I played that with my neighbor a lot. There's a kid who lived 2 houses down from me, and he owned it, and he'd bring it over sometimes, or I'd go over his house and play it. And again, I was never any good at these games, but I would just have fun with it. And one day, he brought it over my house, and we're playing it on the Super Nintendo. And he was doing a run, and he got to M. Bison, and he was just getting pounded. Like, he tried it multiple times with every different character, and he would get close a couple times, but he just couldn't do it. And he tried it a couple times with everybody, and finally, he just got so frustrated. He's like, you fucking do it. I need to take a break for a minute. And so he just gives me the controller, and at this point, I think I'd only played it a couple of times on the Super Nintendo. I'm still getting used to everything. I was like, whatever. I randomly picked Chun-Li, and I beat Bison immediately on my first try. And this dude threw a fit. I didn't even know what I was doing. I think I just kept doing the stupid bird kick by accident and jumping around. I don't know how, but I just distinctly remember he literally just said, fuck it, you do it. Gave me the controller. I picked Chun-Li and whooped Bison's ass. And this dude was like, motherfucker, what the fuck? And it was so hilarious. I'm like, I don't know. You just told me to do it. I did it. I don't know. I'm 10. Don't yell at me. I didn't mean to beat the fucking game. And I couldn't duplicate that if I tried, because I think I continued to play the game, and I think I lost like two fights or so later. So it's not that I was good. It was totally just that I was lucky, but the timing of it was perfect. And the fact that I was able to do it with Chun-Li of all people made it even better, because I was half goofing when I picked her. Like, all right, fuck it. I'll do it with the chick. And then boom. So as far as the developers even considering the fact that she would be a weaker character, I just find that ironic, because she's who I played as the first time I was able to beat the fucking game.
Well,
irony.
Now we got William. How did you first encounter?
I never finished.
Warrior. Oh, you didn't finish?
No.
We ramble.
No, I was saying like, yeah, I think I saw it in arcade, but the arcade first, and like I said, the thing that drew me to it was seeing Chun-Li and that little lightning kick, seeing other people play. So I did try to play, but of course, I don't have a mortgage. I can't use my mom's mortgage, because like I said, I could play some of the games with the tokens, but the game that actually took the quarters, that was on us, and that was one of the quarter games. So nice. So I would try to play, but I would suck at it. But I would always pick Chun-Li because I liked, because I thought it was cool. Said I never, a female character, and I liked the little kick thing, but I would still lose. And like most of us, I didn't start playing the game mostly until there was the home port of it on the Super Nintendo. So that's my main experience playing the game. Ah, nice. And this is all I could find, because everything else are my Super Famicom games.
Yeah.
And I lost all my Super Nintendo ones.
One of the last things I want before we throw it to William to tell us his story is this is actually a cool reference, because if you guys remember, obviously y'all know that Chun-Li wears the blue outfit in her game, and for whatever reason in the versus screen they kind of flubbed it and gave her like this reddish outfit, which is kind of weird. And that eventually became her second outfit when the sequel game, or the upgraded game, would later give characters, the whole character was the same character thing. But that was a weird flub that right off the bat, Chun-Li didn't have her. And not only that, but we noticed she's like this, and like she's missing her gauntlet. So Chun-Li had little flubs there in the thing. And also like censorship, everyone's comments, Balrog's comment was, Your fists have my blood on them, and of course, can't say that in Super Nintendo. I forgot what his quote was. It was something else, but it wasn't that.
I'm the strongest woman in the world.
Oh, well, Balrog's quote.
Oh, Balrog.
Yeah, Tony
Oh.
kept that one.
Balrog.
Yeah.
Never mind. Yeah, he did. Yeah, okay. I don't remember it, so I don't remember what he said. But yeah, it was interesting. Oh, something else too. My aunt my aunt that lives in New York, with her Street Fighter game, whenever she saw an arcade cabinet, Street Fighter 2 arcade cabinet, whenever we would visit, she would always jump to the cabinet, get in front of us for some reason. I mean, come on now, we're the kids. She would jump to the cabinet first. She would get on that game, and she would always pick Chun-Li and beat everybody.
There it
She
is.
even did it older.
Now, before I get into my first experience with Street Fighter 2, one last fun fact about Chun-Li is her character design, on top of having the thick thighs, is also based after another character from a game series called Strider. There were these 3 villains that were boss characters known as the 3 Winds, and there were these 3 Chinese acrobats. And he took the design originally taken from Strider and then added his little twist to it and made her the character that we know and love today. Now, my first encounter with the Street Fighter series was a place called Star Castle Arcade out here in Savannah, and I first walked in and went to go to the restroom, and I had to fight through a line of people just to get by and go through the restroom. So I was like, taking a whiz. I was like, that was weird. So I walked back, and as I'm walking back, I see through this line of people, and I look at the screen, and I just see like these amazing graphics. I think they were using, it was like Kin versus Guile. And so I was like, all right, you know what? I'm down for this. As soon as the line kind of cleared up, I kind of put my quarter on the side of the screen and waited my turn. I got roasted, but that was my first real encounter with it. The graphics were incredible. That was the first time that I heard a game that, even though it had audio, the audio didn't sound like complete and total like 8-bit garble. You could actually hear the words they were saying, even though they weren't in English, but you could actually hear what they were saying. The graphics were astounding. And ever since then, I had gotten hooked. And I remember on Christmas, I got a copy of Street Fighter 2, but I also got like a really weird peripheral. It was a Capcom fighting stick. And it was an all black stick. It was black, blue, and gray. And it had a hookup to where you could hook it up to a Super Nintendo or a regular Nintendo. And all the buttons could be set to a turbo setting. So I got good with that because it was an actual arcade stick. So I got good with that. And then once I got back to the arcades, I was able to kind of, melt a good few people right up until Tournament Edition came in. But right up until Hyper Fighting, I should say. But yeah, that was my first experience with the Street Fighter 2 arcade game.
Well, you brought up something very interesting, and it might have been this, or it might have been a different one, but I was reading about the successive Street Fighter 2 games, and once they got to Super Street Fighter 2 and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Capcom actually released a very special 6-button turbo controller specifically to play those games with the arcade style layout. It was kind of weird looking, but also kind of cool because they knew people were going to have a problem playing the game with the standard Super Nintendo or even the Genesis 6-button controller. So Capcom themselves said, we're going to address that with our own controller. And that was a pretty big hit, too. That was pretty cool. You didn't see that a lot back then where a company would put out a controller specifically to play one game better. But that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool of them to do that.
Now, also a funnier story behind that, the reason why like games like Tournament Edition and Hyper Fighting began was due to bootlegging. There was a Chinese company that bootlegged and ROM hacked a copy of Street Fighter 2, and I remember this game specifically because it used to be at the Circle K back in the day, but it was a version of Street Fighter called Street Fighter Rainbow Edition. This was a very weird game because you could shoot multiple fireballs. Upon pressing the start button, you could change your character on the fly and just do all sort of craziness. Like you could even vary the actual speed of your character, the fireballs, everything.
So,
And
William, is it safe to say that there were strange things afoot at Circle K?
yes,
I was
very
waiting-
much so.
I was waiting for it.
Just real
But-
quick, Johnny. So apparently this magazine cost from Editorial Vid cost 26 pesos and 50 cents, whatever that would have been in dollars back then. What do you think of that one, Johnny? Because you were there during that time.
Okay, so that's a very interesting fact about him. The Black Street Fighter game. Because okay, let me go in pieces. Let me go and kind of give my what I first saw Street Fighter 2. I think it's a pretty good game. One thing that was very cool and very like, I guess nowadays it would be like how now people put online gaming. I guess back then it was a whole like there's a lot of people playing the games like versus matches. Like you fight versus this person and that person was like pretty good concept they had, and I think it was like one of the few games that did that back in the day. So it's interesting how back then like people would actually stay in arcade stores or supermarkets or wherever they have their they would stay there for hours having huge matches. This is like way before we had these big, fighting tournaments and people doing online gaming. So it's very interesting that back then that was kind of like the original concept of that, going on. That's pretty interesting. And in terms of the Rainbow Fighter, Street Fighter 2, whatever that is called, it's very interesting that in Mexico, that game was extremely popular, and it's so popular back then that a lot of people actually thought, I guess, it was a legit game. And I think that game was more popular in Mexico than the actual, legit Street Fighter 2 Turbo. If I'm not
Capcom was not happy about that, but it's true. Like a lot of people really loved that version of the game because of all the wacky, crazy stuff you could do.
Yeah.
Capcom flipped out when they saw it, and that pretty much led to the development of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and all that because they were like, we got to step it up because this bootleg is kicking our butt at the marketplace. That was just such a crazy situation. Like, can you imagine? I wasn't there for it. You guys were apparently. That's amazing to me. I seen a
Yeah.
whole documentary about that.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, I learned about that Rainbow Edition like way, like years, internet age after the fact. And I saw it. I said, well, I guess it was a ROM hack or something. That's what I thought. Then I found out about that tidbit of information that, that you just mentioned. I said, whoa, this was from back then? Someone had the time and the energy to do that back then?
Like you could jump up in the air and throw 3 fireballs in a row and shit like that.
I remember.
Yeah.
Totally broken, but people had fun playing it. But it was just like Capcom was mad about it because the thing is, it wrecked the gameplay balance entirely, and it was basically whoever could spam special attacks the fastest would win because you could literally just flood the screen with 50 fireballs.
Yeah.
And, and win. It was
Our
fun to
dad
mess around with. But they were like, okay, we have to do like something that's kind of in this vein, but with legitimate gameplay balance that's actually playable. And, so in a way it was a good thing that it happened because it forced Capcom to evolve the Street Fighter 2 gameplay instead of just what they had been doing, which with each upgrade they would like add 4 characters and give you new colors.
Yeah.
That Rainbow Edition forced them to look at their own product and legitimately enhance and upgrade it themselves.
Crank up the speed.
And that's one thing I gotta give Capcom credit to. They do definitely take feedback from their fan base because one of the execs actually ran into a copy of Rainbow Edition and he played it and then he said, all right, after he came back and played that craziness, he went back and played the regular Street Fighter 2 and he was like, well, holy shit, this feels like I'm playing underwater because it moves so slow. So he actually went to the guys at Capcom and had them develop the Turbo Edition and make it faster. And the guys at Capcom originally were like, "No, we don't approve of this. This might not work too well." But then when they put the demos out and listened to the fans, they were going crazy for it. So that's what got that pushed out the door. So I think it's funny that a ROM hack that basically, right up unless you actually saw it, for the most part, was an urban legend back in the day, was what pretty much kicked off the combo situations and the hyper fighting we get into today. As a matter of fact, part of that influence even started, oddly enough, another game for another company due to the speed of his combos, known as Killer Instinct. Because one of the guys from Rare actually played Rainbow Edition, and he came up with the crazy idea of the ultra combos and everything from playing the Street Fighter Rainbow Edition game.
Yeah. For us, a high school kid told me about that stuff, but like you said, it was like an urban legend. All I could go was what that guy was saying. I didn't know if it was true or not or whatever. It's kind of like when Dragon Ball Z was popular. Almost everyone claimed they saw Super Saiyan 5, 6, and 7, and you're just like, yeah, I'm sure, yeah. But our dad went to a trip to Mexico because before we would officially move there, he wanted to check out the terrain and all that. So he filmed some arcades because we were big fans of it. He filmed some War Heroes, but then we saw the Street Fighter game, and like you said, the screen was full of waving Hadokens. And while they're still waving and bopping the guy because the guy can't block all these Hadokens, Ryu's like clearly like show, you're like almost like the whole fucking screen. You know what I mean? You're getting hit by that while there's like 50 Hadokens bashing you. It was insane. And we were like, what the fuck? And
Now, I will say this.
Mhm.
I'll ask this. Who here has the 30th anniversary collection for something? The one that came out a few years ago.
Was it the one that you had up, Jupi, I think, or?
No, that was an older one. This was the one that came out just a few years ago.
I think I have it for the PS4.
Yeah, the version I have was the anniversary collection that came out for the PS2, the 15th anniversary.
Yeah, that one I
got
think
everything
includes
on
like all of them, like Street Fighter 2s, the 3s, the alphas, the whole shit,
The whole thing. The whole
Yeah.
thing, yeah.
hmm
So that's the one I have. That's the one that's in the system now.
Oh, and also, of course, Street Fighter 1,
Yes, but I
a
will
must-have game,
playing this, I definitely was excited to get this because I had only played a few of the games really in depth at all. So getting the chance to play all of them was very exciting to me. And I did play all of them, and I think I did manage to beat most of them. I mostly play Ryu because I'm a basic bitch. But yeah, I mean, so playing through them in order of release, from Street Fighter 2 to Championship Edition to Hyper Fighting to Super Street Fighter 2 to Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, playing through all of those games like that was really incredible to me because feeling the gameplay changes along the way. Some of them are subtle, some of them are huge, but yeah, like you feel it along the way, and especially jumping from regular Street Fighter 2, going from like hyper fighting to super, it's such a jump, and it's really indescribable. You have to feel it with your own hands and play it, where all of a sudden you really are playing a different game. It's not just new color palettes and 4 new guys this time. It's like, wow, this is faster, this is deeper, there's more to do. It's still Street Fighter 2, but it's really like Street Fighter 2.5, and that's really incredible to feel. Anybody who doesn't have this collection, I definitely recommend picking it up because, again, I'm pretty basic at Street Fighter, but this was the best possible history lesson. And even only spending 10 minutes on the first game, getting to play through all the different versions of Street Fighter 2 and the alphas and Street Fighter 3. I would have loved to see the EX games, but they didn't. We'll talk about those. But yeah, Street Fighter 2, it would be an understatement to say it's the most successful part of the entire franchise because by 2017, just the Street Fighter 2 brand alone, between all the games and the ports and the merchandise, has made over $10 billion for Capcom. And that was of 8 years ago or whatever. So you can only imagine, right? It's so huge. Just Street Fighter 2 alone. That doesn't even get into the rest of the franchise. Just that brand. That's how successful it is. That's pretty fantastic.
So any memories of the Super Nintendo versions? I only got two main ones I want to say. The first thing is, if you guys remember, the original Road Warrior, not the later ones. Later ones kind of fixed that. But the original Road Warrior had the weird thing. I don't know whose dumbass idea was that, but like, you know how the characters have the weak, strong, and stronger version of each super attack, right? So for whatever reason, the Road Warrior SNES version had the brilliant idea of making it that if you do the slow one, the character sounds kind of like the arcade, your typical deep voice, but then you raise the pitch, the faster the attack. So you literally have Ryu saying like, Hadouken, Hadouken, Hadouken. They're going the faster ones. And me and Johnny boot up the game, and you see like, you know, little track mode, and we hear the voices. We're like, oh fuck, let's play this game, make sure this game is good, because what the fuck, you know, that kind of shit. That's the first memory of that. And the second memory, if you remember, Johnny, if you were kids back then, we were like 12 or whatever, you know, and we're playing that shit all night, all weekend, all that stuff. So you might remember, you know, Mark, Johnny, it's 2 in the morning, you're still playing that crap. Go to sleep.
Yeah.
God.
Oh man, we were so bad. He's like, if he catches up one more time, I'm taking that shit back to the store. I don't give a damn. You know?
I never got yelled at like that. Like my parents were happy I wasn't doing drugs. So I was allowed to stay up late and play video games as much as I wanted to.
I had a bedtime.
Nobody was going to threaten me with no bedtime bullshit. Some nights I didn't even come home. I would just I'd hook up with a buddy. We would just go out. We'd get White Castle or whatever, and then I'd just spend the night at his house. And then I'd go to school or not the next morning, and then I'd come home in the afternoon, and I'd be like, hey, Dad, what's up? He's like, fuck were you? I'm like, I was hanging out with Rick. He's like, oh, all right, well, could have called. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, we were out. There were no cell phones back then, so, you know, you weren't always expected to call. But, yeah, I had a really long leash because my parents were just glad I wasn't doing drugs. So if I wanted to stay up late playing video games or whatever, they were just happy that I wasn't doing something worse. I was lucky in that regard. I got to pretty much do whatever fuck I wanted. It was pretty cool.
Who tried to beat the game with like no losses and 2 perfects and whatever the fuck else they said, so you could try to unlock Shenlong like the EGM magazine said?
No. I just played the game as is because I didn't read video game magazines.
Because the thing is, I would ask a friend, because I didn't know this, I'm saying, how can you do that? Because even if you make it to Bison, since you gotta like, keep blocking his scissor kicks, and he's like, yeah, but they don't take off health though. And I'm like, oh yeah, because I think in the first game, you can block that shit all day. It doesn't take health. There's the later games where he did that, where you do get chip damage, but yeah.
Yeah. It didn't dawn on me till like a week later after rereading it, and I'm just like, well, I did everything I could. What the fuck went on? And then I saw the name. Like, the name wasn't what caught me, but the city and the state, because it was an April Fool's issue of EGM, and the city and the state he was from was Fooled Again Ha. Yeah, it literally said "fooled again," ha, and I'm just like, you son of a bitch. It was an April Fool's joke. I was so mad. I was this close to taking that Nintendo cartridge and going in my backyard and just burying it like it was the old ET game and just walking away from it. Like,
that prank was so
like,
glorious.
They'll later copy that because it was the same basic concept. If you do all that shit, Zhang Long appears, kills Bison, now you gotta fight him. And that's what Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo would eventually do with Akuma. You would just come in, waste Bison, now you gotta fight his ass.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good opportunity for us to segue into talking about the lore of Street Fighter, because this was the game, Street Fighter 2 and all its subsequent versions of such, were where the series really started developing its lore, which is kind of confusing for a lot of people because the games sort of go in that Metal Gear Solid shit where the story is all out of order. So I know that at least one of us has to have at least some kind of handle on the actual storyline of the Street Fighter franchise and how it really started with these games. So why don't we try to address that a little bit? Because we did that with Mortal Kombat, and it's only right that we do it for Street Fighter.
Like Kingdom Hearts that gave up ages ago.
I mean, the lore, at least for the regular Street Fighter, wasn't as convoluted because not so many characters, and that was before. Because you know how it is. The more characters they create, the more the characters start like, oh, this guy is Ken's long lost whatever. Oh, this guy used to go to school with Zangief. They keep like doing that shit. But back then it was more varied, you know. So, I mean, the most we know is that Ryu was the champion of the first Street Fighter. So he gave that scar to Sagat. So Sagat wants revenge on Ryu. Bison killed Chun-Li's father, so that's her motivation. Chun-Li, Bison killed oh my God, I can't talk.
Charlie Nash.
Bison killed Charlie's friend Charlie, which that's Guile's motivation. I guess Ken's a fighter too, I guess. And wait, what's that?
It's Mochi.
Passion fruit mochi.
Okay, that's Ken's motivation to get out of those. And Blanca was a weird guy that was lost in the wild or whatever, and then at the end his mother found him. So I guess did they ever explain that really? Like in game, I know that movies and cartoons did whatever, but in the actual games, did they ever explain how Blanca transformed into like a big green monster? I don't believe.
Basically, as the lore goes, he at birth he accidentally was dropped in some water with it was where his mother worked, and his mother accidentally dropped him in a tank with what appeared to be electric eels. Now they shocked him, but he survived, and something happened during the electrical shock that caused like a mutation in him, which is what turned him green and gave him his weird orange hair. So that was the lore that I had officially got.
And then of course, nothing dates the game more than Zangief because USSR, you know, and dancing with Gorbachev. But it was just basically, you know, Russia's #1 wrestler. And Honda was just wanting to prove that sumo was the best fighting style ever. That's basically his plot. Is that all Dalsim? I don't know what his deal is. I mean, he's a master of yoga. I don't know why he enters the tournament. Maybe the prize money. I don't know.
Well, the bare bones of what's going on here, as I understand it, at least the thing that links everyone together, is that M. Bison sets up this tournament because he wants to find the best fighters in the world so he can brainwash them into working for his Shadaloo organization. So ultimately, that's what the tournament aspect is about. And
yeah, but that actually came a bit later, though. That's a surprising thing.
Everybody's got their own personal reasons for being a part of it because they don't know that the end game is them getting turned into murder zombies. They don't know that yet. But that's
the thing. That actually came later, and that's why that animated movie that we're going to get into is extremely influential because a ton of plots actually came from that movie. And that goes into what you're saying too. But back then it was just a tournament and whatever.
And actually a stranger connection between the two. Yeah, Dalsim did go in wanting the prize money to save his village, but there's also a bit of a revenge story, which is weird for Dalsim, because if you look into one of the other games, which was Street Fighter Alpha, he's actually going after Balrog because of the fact that Balrog knocked out and killed one of his pet elephants.
Oh.
Yeah, like he did a Buffalo Rush, nails the elephant, and kills him. So he's actually out for revenge for Balrog, but he's also trying to make the money to save his village. So, yeah, that's a two-parter right there.
I'll box a fucking elephant right now.
Yeah.